Welcome to the deep dive. We're all drowning in information these days, right? Just overwhelmed. And it's getting harder to spot what's actually insightful, what's, genuinely true. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into something, well, pretty provocative. We're looking at Wappies and conspiracy thinking. Our source is a transcript from a Dutch YouTube video. It's called Bergsma en Benning #6 zijn Wappies de nieuwe wetenschappers, which translates to something like, are Wappies the new scientists? Pretty bold claim right there.
Yeah, it really is. And what's fascinating here, our mission for this deep dive is to explore all that objectively. We'll look at how the source defines these terms, how they critique them. We'll analyze their arguments about, say, mainstream media, academic views, and we'll really get into that core assertion that different thinkers, or Wappies as they say, are the ones actually seeking truth now. And just to be clear, we're staying impartial. We're just exploring the ideas in the source, however contentious they might seem.
Okay, so let's start where the source starts. It kicks off with these terms, Wappie and Anders Denkenden. That second one means different thinkers in Dutch, and they jump right into conspiracy thinking. The video claims that the term itself is a CIA construct, post-Kennedy assassination. They say it was to, put people with different views on the murder into a box. Interestingly, the source does acknowledge that this origin story is itself, well, a conspiracy.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture they're painting, the source basically argues that, in a way, everyone's a conspiracy thinker. It's quite a thought. They give these pretty relatable examples, like the Sinterklaas tradition in the Netherlands with kids' parents conspiring, essentially, or a director ordering a board meeting where maybe secret decisions are made about hiring, firing. They even reach back to Julius Caesar's assassination, a classic conspiracy. So their point is, it's not some fringe activity. It's kind of inherent.
That really reframes it, doesn't it? It's less about if conspiracies happen and more about that label, conspiracy thinking. The source sees it as a frame, something that boxes in thought. Cornering thinking itself is the phrase they use, like it's meant to dismiss certain ideas out of hand. And the hosts in the video, they actually embrace these labels. They call themselves Wappies or Complotdenkers. They even made up Complotnot. So what does this all mean? They're suggesting these labels aren't just descriptive, they're tools. Tools may be used to control what counts as acceptable doubt or dissent. Okay, so given how they redefine conspiracy thinking and embrace Wappie, it's probably not surprising they have some strong views on the mainstream approach. Let's get into their critique of how media and academia look at Wappies. They mention specific Dutch shows like De New World, and names like Rosanne Hertzberger, Ron Harambam, Stef Opper's academics, commentators.
Yeah, and this raises an important question from their perspective. Why are those mainstream discussions so frustrating for them? The source argues that these discussions, well, they often fail to even clearly define conspiracy thinking. Instead, they say the tendency is to psychologize the individuals, link their beliefs to personal stuff, relationship issues, psychological conditions.
Right, rather than engaging with the actual ideas or the evidence presented.
Exactly. It's seen as a deflection.
That's a key criticism from the source. They feel these talks never go into the conspiracies themselves. They don't examine the supposed evidence of conspiracies. Instead, the source claims they spend hours over who these conspiracy thinkers are. It becomes about the person, not the premise.
And they offer a pretty stark counterargument. They claim Wappies were always right but never got credit. They point to things from the COVID era, questions raised early on about, say, vaccine infectivity or dangers or maybe pharmaceutical profits. And according to the source, many of these concerns turned out to be right as more information came out later. It's like they're arguing for vindication.
So the overall picture they paint is of an establishment trying to protect this old world fiction. The idea that government always acts in our best interest. Science is purely about truth. And by doing that, the source suggests the establishment avoids uncomfortable truths about power, maybe self-preservation. It avoids a real challenge. Which leads us right to their most provocative claim. This is where it gets really interesting. They flat out state, Wappies are the new scientists.
Right. And their rationale. They argue that mainstream science is, in their words, failing. They feel it's become too focused on consensus, getting everyone to agree rather than encouraging genuine, open inquiry, critical thinking. For example, they dismiss the 97% consensus on climate science. They call it debunked, say the models are out of context. They see a fundamental problem in how science is being done.
And they use this really striking line. God is not dead, the scientific shelf is dead. Powerful imagery. It suggests traditional authorities, sources of truth are crumbling. They argue Wappies, maybe because they're outside that system, are more connected to reality. They possess a helicopter view, they say, and they're willing to ask about the power behind science, the influences shaping research.
And to show what they mean by Wappie knowledge, they give specific examples. People who might not be highly educated in the traditional sense, but who are incredibly knowledgeable about really niche, complex subjects. Things like Kabbalah, Anunnaki, Book of Enoch, Book of Giants. The video hosts actually say they learn incredibly much from these people right now. They're positioning these unconventional thinkers as the real pioneers today.
Okay, building on that idea of being outside the mainstream, the source talks about how the label Wappie gets used. They see it as a tool for exclusion, for demonization. They give an example involving a Dutch talk show host, Veert Duke, on a show called Orange Zoomer, apparently dismissing an Aryer named Arno van Kessel.
Yeah, the Arno von Kessel case is pretty central to their argument here about dissent being crushed. Von Kessel, a lawyer, filed a lawsuit against Mark Rutte, the Dutch PM then, and Bill Gates. The lawsuit alleged the COVID vaccine was a bioweapon, and the source points out he was later arrested, suspected of being part of a criminal network exhibiting anti-institutional behavior. They frame this as a direct result of his challenging views.
Right. The source really emphasizes that Van Kessel used legal channels within the institutions. He was trying to work within the system to find truth, they argue, but he still got demonized and arrested. They say the arrest smells of an unfair process, maybe even obstruction, like the system protecting itself from scrutiny.
And this connects to another big concern they raise, a proposed new Dutch law about criminalizing the glorifying terrorism. Their worry, as presented in the source, is that the definitions are expanding. The NCTV, the Dutch counterterrorism body, and the AIVD, the intelligence service. According to the source, they're starting to include anti-institutional thinking and just general distrust of institutions under this umbrella, which, the source claims, makes people who simply hold critical views guilty by association. It potentially blurs the line between dissent and actual crime.
And the source draws this really stark historical parallel. They bring up the Weimar Republic, transitioning to the Third Reich, specifically mentioning the 1933 Reichstag fire and how free speech was curbed afterwards. Then they talk about a film clip about Hans and Sophie Skoll, the White Rose Resistance students. The Nazis called them terrorists for distributing anti-war leaflets. They were executed. And the source states it plainly. The terrorists of then are the heroes of now. It's a direct comparison, linking past dissent against tyranny to present fears about censorship, asking you to think about who history remembers kindly. Now, the source broadens this out. It argues it's not just Wappies facing this kind of cancellation. It's also brilliant free thinkers and what they call Luterende leaders, which kind of means purifying leaders, figures who challenge norms to bring about maybe a clearer view of things.
Yeah, and they discuss the case of Jaap van Sweden, the world-famous conductor. According to the source, he faced accusations of transgressive behavior. These came from an investigative show called Pointer, which the source dismisses pretty harshly as a mob justice platform, another example for them of established figures being unfairly attacked.
And the source actually defends figures like this. They bring up the saying, the bigger the mind, the bigger the beast. The argument is that exceptionally talented people they list, Gauguin, Nabokov, Pim Fortuyn, Michael Jackson, maybe they should be forgiven more for eccentricities because their genius contributes so much. It's a really provocative idea about talent versus social norms.
And they contrast this Western trend, as they see it, with the Vaganova Ballet Academy in Russia. They hold it up as an example of a place that's harsh, hardcore. Under figures like Siskaridze, the training is incredibly tough, but it produces world-class dancers. They reference clips from a documentary, The Dance of the Little Swans, showing his demanding style, but it's effective. The source concludes with lines like, hard work is the only way to dance, and diamonds are made under pressure. It's a very different philosophy.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? The source argues this Western focus on safety, on everyone participating, the whole everyone gets a medal thing. They believe it actually stifles excellence. It holds people back. They use the example of Leah Thomas, the trans swimmer in the U.S., outcompeting biological women. They note this policy was, according to them, reversed by Donald Trump. For them, it's a clear case of inclusivity potentially undermining merit. Okay, shifting gears again, the source also critiques what it calls misguided resistance. Okay, they use the example of Marit Turnquist, a Swedish-Dutch children's author. She housed 8 Afghan boys and described her home as an onderdrukadres. That term, onderdrukadres, is historically significant in the Netherlands. It means a hiding place, specifically used for Jews during World War II.
Right, and the source strongly disapproves of her using that term. They call the comparison completely gratuitous, a resistance fantasy. They emphasize there was no equivalent danger, no train riding to the east to throw these boys into the crematorium, as they put it. They see it as trivializing real historical peril and heroism.
And the source follows this up with some pretty strong counterarguments about asylum seekers. Claims about them getting preferential housing, fat bikes, and washing machines over Dutch citizens. And it makes a serious accusation about Sweden, alleging a lion's share of migrants are responsible for increases in crime, rape, murder. It's a very critical view of current policies.
Yeah, and the source's stance is firm. This kind of moral high ground taken by people like Turnquist, it devalues the genuine life-risking heroism of those who hid Jews during the war. They see it as appropriating historical sacrifice for actions they consider far less significant, ultimately cheapening the meaning of real resistance.
After all that heavy discussion, the source does inject some moments of dark humor. They share a tweet of the week from someone named Mario Beek. During evening rush hour, I often stir the pan with a crying baby. To which Mario replied, I'd rather use a wooden spoon, but who am I? It's definitely sharp humor. Maybe a way they comment on things differently.
hmm And then there's a segment they call a cultural treasure hunt. This one featured Ed van der Elsken, a Dutch photographer and filmmaker. They showed his photos of Amsterdam from the 70s and 80s. The source portrays it as this harmonious, diverse city where everyone belonged. It feels like a nostalgic look back, maybe suggesting a lost sense of community or freedom that the hosts feel is missing now.
And finally, they include a verse from the Bible, specifically Ephesians 5, verses 6 through 11 from the King James Version. They mention they prefer the KJV for its Shakespearean feel. The verses are, Let no man deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. Be not ye therefore partakers with them. For ye were sometimes darkness, but now are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. But all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light. For whatsoever doth make manifest is light. Wherefore he saith, Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. As we wrap up, just a small detail, the host in the video wore a t-shirt with the Nikita Khrushchev quote, If you start throwing hedgehogs at me, I'll throw back porcupines. And the source adds this interesting Russian context. Porcupine, or dikobraz in Russian, apparently means crazy little brother. A fittingly prickly endnote, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And if we connect all this back, this deep dive has really presented a challenging view, hasn't it, on how we see truth, dissent, even excellence. The source suggests those labeled Wappies might be the real truth seekers now, while arguing mainstream institutions are failing. We heard their concerns about dissent being stifled, about brilliance being attacked for the sake of, well, what they call safety, or. So it leaves a big question for you, the listener. In this flood of information, with definitions always shifting, how do you critically evaluate things? How do you challenge narratives responsibly? And maybe more fundamentally, what values do we need as a society to actually foster truth and excellence and genuine heroism? What's your role in figuring that out amidst all the noise? Something to think about.